Have you ever had that strange, persistent feeling? Like something in your life is just stuck. You meditate, you journal, you light incense and burn sage. You repeat your affirmations every morning. You've read the books, you've done the vision boards. You work hard, you stay humble. And yet, despite all of your efforts, peace feels fleeting, and abundance always seems just out of reach. Sound familiar? It's one of the most frustrating spiritual paradoxes. Doing everything right, but not feeling the results. Like you're climbing a mountain, only to find it keeps getting taller the higher you go. Now, what if I told you, the block isn't in your mind or in the stars, but quite literally in your doorway? Yes, your front door. The truth is, what's happening at the entrance of your home may be silently influencing your ability to receive joy, wealth, and inner clarity. I know it sounds a little wild, but bear with me, because what we're about to uncover is something most people never consider. Your front door isn't just where packages get delivered or shoes get kicked off. It's the energetic gateway to your life. In many ancient spiritual traditions, including Buddhism, Tibetan Bon, and even Vedic design systems like Vastu, the entrance to a home is seen as a mirror of the soul. It's where the outer world meets your inner sanctuary. It's where new energy enters and stagnant energy exits. It's the threshold through which opportunity passes, or doesn't. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly looked at your front door? Not just physically, but energetically. What does it say about you? What does it say about what you're ready to receive? What does it say to the world, to your spirit guides, to the universe? Because whether we realize it or not, we are always sending signals, not just through our words and thoughts, but through our environments, through the placement of objects, through what we neglect, through what we unconsciously allow. And before we continue, may I gently ask something of you? If you find value in this reflection, if it stirs something inside you, I invite you to support this journey. Just one like, one share, or a quick subscribe to New Day Mindfulness can help me reach 1,000 followers and bring more soulful, high-quality teachings like this to others who may need them. Your support means the world to me. Now let's return to the threshold. In today's episode, I'm going to share 6 often overlooked but incredibly powerful factors that may be blocking the flow of prosperity, joy, and peace in your life, all because they're happening right at your threshold. Now, before we jump in, I want you to hear this. This is not a lecture about home decor. This is not about rearranging your house to look spiritual. This is about cultivating sacred attention to the spaces that hold your karma. Your front door is more than a door. It's a living altar. It's the first breath your home takes every time you cross it. And what it breathes in becomes your life force. Let me give you a personal example. A few years ago, I was living in a beautiful space in the mountains. It was peaceful, quiet, and filled with positive energy, or so I thought. I was doing my meditation daily. I had all the candles, prayer beads, mantras, you name it. But I kept hitting walls, financially, creatively, emotionally. It felt like something was pressing up against me, no matter how much inner work I did. Then one day, during a moment of frustration, I stepped outside for some air. As I turned to look back at my home, I finally saw what had been right in front of me the whole time. A pile of old shoes at the doorway, scattered, dirty, and completely blocking the entrance. Next to that, a cracked, faded doormat from years ago, and a dying plant leaning sideways in a rusted pot. It hit me like a wave. This was how I was greeting the energy of life. This was the first impression I was offering to the world and to myself. I took an afternoon to clear it. I cleaned the area, removed what was broken, replaced what was dead. I added a small prayer stone and a pot of fresh basil. I swept. I offered incense. And that night, I slept deeper than I had in months. That week, I received 2 new clients out of nowhere, and more importantly, I felt a renewed sense of alignment. Was it magic? Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe, the external finally reflected the internal. And that's what I want to offer you today. A way to realign, to clear the unconscious clutter standing between you and the life you're trying to create. Because here's the truth. You can't meditate your way out of chaos if your environment is sending mixed signals. You can't affirm abundance when your physical threshold is screaming, "I'm overwhelmed," or "I'm not ready," or "I've given up." The great Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Your true home is in the present moment." But we can't enter that home if our doorway is clouded with confusion. So in this video, I'm going to guide you through 6 key entryway mistakes that people make, most of them without even realizing it. I'll share the spiritual meaning behind each one, real-world stories of transformation, and offer mindful steps you can take to correct the energy today. Each of these is simple, but deeply transformative. And no, you don't need to buy anything fancy. You don't need to remodel your house or move to the forest. This is about intentional, conscious adjustment. It's about treating the threshold of your life like the threshold of a temple, with care, reverence, and awareness. So if you've been doing everything right and still feel like something's off, if you're ready to stop pushing and start aligning, if you believe that small acts of sacred attention can create massive spiritual shifts, then you're exactly where you need to be. Let's take a breath together and begin. 1. Cluttered trash bins or old energy near the door. In Buddhist thought and in many Eastern philosophies, the home is not merely a structure. It is an extension of one's spiritual self. And the threshold of that home, the front entrance, is far more than a point of entry. It is the energetic portal where the internal and external worlds converge, the very gateway through which life flows in and out. That's why the state of this sacred space, especially when it's cluttered, neglected, or harboring the residue of yesterday, can speak volumes about your spiritual readiness to receive abundance, clarity, and peace. Let's look at one of the most common yet energetically potent disruptors of prosperity: clutter, trash bins, and stagnant energy near the front door. We often think of trash as neutral, a natural byproduct of consumption. We discard food wrappers, old mail, broken tools, and yesterday's messes without much thought. But on a symbolic level, trash represents more than just physical waste. It represents the past. More specifically, the parts of our past that we haven't fully let go of. In many Buddhist and yogic traditions, there is an emphasis on letting go of attachment. But attachment doesn't only exist in the mind. It manifests physically in our homes, closets, and yes, even at our front doors. When trash bins, clutter, or old forgotten objects accumulate near the entrance to our home, they act like energetic anchors, quietly signaling to the universe, "I am not yet ready to release. I am still holding on." This message can be subtle or loud, depending on how long we've ignored the space. Perhaps it's a broken lamp we've left by the door with the intention to fix someday, or an old rug we no longer love but haven't replaced. Or it could be as literal as a trash bin placed right at the gate, a container full of decay and odor being the first thing to greet our guests and our energy. In this way, we may be unintentionally welcoming the energy of decay into our homes. The result? A subconscious resistance to new beginnings, a lingering mental fog, and in many cases, a repeating pattern of effort that doesn't seem to go anywhere. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what ancient mystics already understood. Our physical environments have a direct impact on our mental and emotional states. The limbic system, the part of the brain that regulates emotion, is highly responsive to visual and sensory input. When our entrance is cluttered, dirty, or chaotic, it subtly elevates stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Think about it. How do you feel when you walk into a room that's messy, dimly lit, and filled with objects you don't love? You may not consciously notice, but your body tenses. Your breath becomes shallow. Your mind becomes more easily distracted or anxious. Now flip that. Imagine walking into a clean, thoughtfully curated space. A small potted plant by the door, a fresh mat, a touch of incense, or a calming bell. Suddenly, your body softens, your mind slows. You are welcomed home, not just physically, but energetically. Your front entrance is the first place where that mind-body-home connection comes alive. And when you fill that space with objects that symbolize waste, rejection, or disorder, your nervous system responds accordingly, registering it as resistance, not openness. To illustrate this in a more personal, human way, I want to share the story of someone I once mentored. He had spent most of his life as a structural engineer, highly analytical, deeply logical. After decades in the field, he experienced a spiritual awakening during a silent Vipassana retreat. He left his job shortly after and began studying Eastern philosophy, eventually becoming a meditation teacher himself. He moved into a small, quiet home outside the city. It was surrounded by trees, filled with light, and set up to be a sanctuary for contemplation and inner work. But oddly, despite all his knowledge and practice, he struggled to attract students. Workshops fell through, income was inconsistent, his motivation began to wane. One day during a Dharma circle we were both attending, the topic of energy flow came up, not just internal but spatial. When we discussed front entrances, he fell silent. "You know," he said, "I just realized I have my garbage bins right by the gate. It's been that way since I moved in. I didn't even think about it." That night he moved them. Not just out of sight, but far enough that they no longer intersected with the energetic pathway into his home. He cleaned the walkway, swept the leaves, added a soft wind chime and a lavender plant. Within a month, he was booked solid with one-on-one sessions. A wellness studio invited him to teach weekly classes. He told me later, "I didn't realize how much my physical neglect was holding back my spiritual message." Another layer to this is the psychological narrative that trash supports. What we leave out in the open communicates something to our unconscious minds. If you constantly walk past clutter or waste every time you come home, you are reinforcing the idea that this is what I deserve. Or worse, this is all I have the energy to manage. This becomes particularly dangerous when it's tied to money. Trash by the door becomes a subtle metaphor. Abundance might come, but just like the garbage, it's taken out just as quickly. This is not to say that everyone with a cluttered front porch is doomed financially, but if your financial life feels stuck, chaotic, or unstable, this is a very tangible, actionable place to begin healing. So what do we do? The action step is deceptively simple, but spiritually potent. Move your trash bins away from the front entrance. This may mean physically relocating them or simply creating a visual block, like a lattice or plant screen. Sweep the entry path. This is a sacred gesture in many Buddhist monasteries, where monks sweep not just to clean, but to practice mindfulness, to prepare the space for blessings. Light incense or ring a bell at your door. These rituals act as energy resets, clearing stagnant vibrations and inviting clarity. Place a small object of intention by the door, a stone, a word, a symbol that represents what you wish to receive. The goal is to transform your entrance into a space of intention, a space that whispers, "I am ready," a space that supports your goals instead of silently contradicting them. Every bag of trash you move away from your doorway is not just an act of cleaning, it's an act of spiritual alignment. It's a statement. I choose presence over the past. I choose clarity over clutter. I choose to invite in what is good and gently release what no longer serves. Because when you shift what stands at your threshold, you shift everything. 2. Dead plants or faded decor. In the teachings of Buddhism and other Eastern philosophies, nature is not seen as something separate from us. It is an extension of our being. The natural world mirrors our inner landscape, and everything we tend to or neglect communicates something to the universe, to the people we encounter, and to our own subconscious. That's why the presence of dead plants or faded, neglected decor near the entrance of your home may be saying more than you think. The entrance to your home is the first thing energy encounters. It's the first thing you see when you return to your sanctuary, and it's the first impression your space offers to the world. What meets you at the door sets the tone not just for your physical space, but for your mindset, your mood, and your flow of abundance. And yet, so many of us unknowingly greet this sacred threshold with decay. With drooping leaves, dusty planters, dried out stems, sun-bleached pots, and forgotten decorations that once sparked joy, but now only serve as visual background noise. These dead or faded objects may not seem harmful at first glance, but their energetic impact is far greater than their appearance would suggest. In Buddhism, plants are deeply symbolic. They represent growth, patience, karma, rebirth, and continuity. The Bodhi tree itself, the sacred fig under which the Buddha attained enlightenment, is a profound representation of awakening and spiritual rootedness. Every tree, every leaf, every sprouting seed is a reminder that all things arise, bloom, wither, and begin again. This cycle is not only natural but sacred. But here's the thing, when a plant dies and is left to decay, untended, unnoticed, or abandoned, it sends a different message. It says, growth has stopped here. Life energy is stagnant here. Attention is absent here. And in the context of your home's entrance, that message matters deeply. Several years ago, I visited a friend in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and she had recently opened a small healing center, a beautiful, peaceful place intended to offer massage, Reiki, and mindfulness workshops. The space had wonderful bones, wooden accents, flowing silk curtains, gentle lighting, but despite her best efforts, she was struggling. Clients came once but didn't return, staff turnover was unusually high, and her own energy felt depleted. She couldn't figure it out. She was pouring her heart into the business. When I arrived, I noticed it immediately. Outside her front door were 5 large clay pots. Each one had once held flowers, but now they were bone dry. Stems hung limp over the sides. The soil was cracked and pale. The pots themselves were faded from the sun. She told me she hadn't thought much of it. She'd been meaning to replant them, but hadn't gotten around to it. I gently explained what those planters were saying, energetically. Nothing is thriving here. Growth has stopped. Attention is missing. That day, we cleared them out together. We added fresh soil and replanted bamboo and mint, plants known for their vitality and spiritual resonance. We blessed the space with water and a short chant, setting the intention that the entrance would now serve as a channel for growth and renewal. Within a month, she called me. Her most consistent clients had referred others. One of her therapists decided to stay long-term, and her own fatigue had lifted. She told me, "I feel like something started flowing again." That's the power of presence. Now, it's important to note that not all signs of age are negative. A beautifully weathered stone Buddha, aged wood, or moss-covered ceramics can all radiate wisdom and harmony if they are intentionally cared for and loved. Minging and fading are part of nature. The issue isn't age, it's neglect. A dead plant is not the same as a resting bonsai. Faded decor is not the same as patina. The difference lies in your attention, your intent, and your care. Ask yourself, does this item reflect the energy I want to live in? Or is it just something I stopped noticing? Replacing dead plants or faded decor isn't about keeping up appearances. It's about making a conscious choice to align your outer world with your inner goals. It's about honoring the energy of life by welcoming it to the place where your life begins, your home. Start simple. Remove any dead or wilted plants from your entry. Choose new greenery that matches your light conditions and capacity to care. Water and prune as a form of spiritual practice, a daily offering to growth and life. Replace sun-damaged decor with something fresh, meaningful, and beautiful. Add color intentionally. Green for vitality, red for abundance, yellow for joy, white for clarity. Every spiritual tradition honors thresholds. In temples, gates are sacred. You bow when you enter. You cleanse before stepping in, because that crossing point is a space between worlds, the seen and unseen, the material and the spiritual. Your home deserves the same reverence. When your entry is tended with care, your entire day shifts. Your mindset adjusts. Your energy opens. Imagine this. You come home from a long day. Instead of being greeted by brown leaves and broken pottery, you see vibrant ferns, a blooming marigold, or the scent of rosemary wafting through the air. You pause, you breathe, you smile. That single moment becomes a spiritual anchor, a micro-meditation, a gentle reminder. Life continues, and you are part of it. Lastly, consider how plant care mirrors self-care. A thriving plant is not just the result of good soil, it's the result of consistency, attention, and love. When we neglect plants, it often parallels how we neglect parts of ourselves. So when you take time to water your door plants, you are not just keeping them alive. You are practicing devotion. You are reminding yourself, I can nurture, I can support growth, I can flourish. And in that, you begin to rebuild the bridge between outer and inner vitality. 3. Damaged doormats and neglected entry items. When we think of thresholds in spiritual practice, we often imagine grand temple gates, ceremonial arches, or sacred passages watched over by guardian deities. But in everyday life, our own thresholds, the entrances to our homes, are just as meaningful. And one of the most overlooked yet symbolically powerful objects in that space is something most people step over without thinking: the doormat. It may seem trivial. After all, a doormat's job is simple: wipe your feet and move on, right? But in both symbolic and energetic terms, that frayed old mat, the chipped planter beside it, or the pile of unused umbrellas can carry weight far beyond their physical forms. They speak silently to visitors, to you, and most importantly, to your subconscious. In Buddhist monastic culture, thresholds are treated with deep reverence. Monks often sweep the entryways multiple times a day, not just to remove dirt, but as a practice of mindfulness. The idea is simple yet profound. The space where one enters a home or a sacred place sets the tone for what follows. And if the entry is treated carelessly, if it's neglected, it can shape the energy of the entire interior space, both physically and energetically. Let's consider what a doormat is, energetically. It's the very first thing you or anyone else touches when entering your space. It's literally what people walk on before stepping into your home. In this way, it holds symbolic importance. It is the transition point between the outer world and your inner sanctuary. If that object is torn, dirty, neglected, or old beyond recognition, what kind of message is it sending? Whether we mean to or not, we allow our environment to speak on our behalf. A damaged mat at the door says, I don't prioritize care. I don't protect my boundaries. I've stopped paying attention. Even worse, it says this to your subconscious every single day. So while you might be inside doing meditation, practicing mantras, working on manifestation, or vision boarding, your doorway is broadcasting an entirely different vibration, one of dismissal, disrepair, or stagnation. A client of mine, let's call her Ava, once reached out to me feeling stuck. She lived alone in a beautiful townhouse but felt increasingly isolated. She worked from home, rarely saw friends, and struggled to form meaningful connections in her new city. Despite being introverted by nature, she craved companionship. Her home, she said, felt quiet, not peaceful quiet, but lonely quiet. I asked her to send a photo of her front door. The moment I saw it, I knew where to begin. The door was lovely, sturdy wood, freshly painted. A small lantern hung above. But right beneath the threshold sat a doormat so worn it was practically see-through. Its once bright pattern had dulled to beige. The corners were frayed. It looked more like discarded fabric than something intentional. When I asked her about it, she blinked in surprise. I honestly didn't even notice. It's just always been there. That's the danger of unconscious decor. Over time, we stop seeing it, but it keeps speaking. I encouraged her to replace it with something meaningful. Don't just pick the first thing on sale, I told her. Find a mat that feels like a welcome, something that mirrors the kind of energy you want your home to radiate. A week later, she sent me a photo of her new mat, hand-woven with subtle earth tones and a small mandala symbol in the center. Beneath it, she had added a tiny engraved stone that read, "Only kindness may enter here." Something shifted. Over the next 2 months, her energy lightened. A neighbor invited her to a community gardening event. She joined a yoga class down the street. Her home, once silent, began to echo with laughter. She later told me, I didn't even realize how closed off I'd become until I opened the door to others. All she changed was the mat, but that physical act marked an energetic shift, from unconscious neglect to conscious welcome. Perhaps the most important phrase in Ava's story is one I hear all the time. I didn't even notice. That's not just a sign of distraction. It's a symptom of disconnection. In psychology, when we experience prolonged stress or emotional numbness, we often stop noticing the small things. Things that once brought us joy, beauty, or care. Our sensory systems dull. our emotional range narrows. We become utilitarian. We stop asking, how does this feel? And only ask, does it work? Your doormat may still work, but if it no longer communicates care, beauty, or welcome, it's not working for your spirit. Noticing is the first act of reclamation. So how do we fix this? You don't need to spend a lot. You don't need to make it Pinterest perfect, but you do need to be intentional. Here's a mindful practice you can try this week. Step 1, stand outside your front door for 5 minutes. Don't open it, just observe. How does the space feel? What do you see? What would a stranger think? More importantly, what do you feel as you look at the items there? Step 2, remove everything from the entry area, clean the space, sweep, mop, remove leaves, dust, cobwebs. Treat it as a cleansing ceremony, not a chore. Step 3, choose one new item to add, something that signals care. It could be a new mat, a fresh potted plant, a welcome sign, a stone, a bell, or a spiritual symbol. Step 4, set an intention. Say it out loud or silently. This entrance is sacred. May all who cross this threshold bring and receive kindness, clarity, and compassion. Step 5, keep it up. Every week, spend a few minutes tending to your threshold. Even if nothing seems wrong, maintain the vibration of presence. Ultimately, the way we treat our entrance reflects our openness to life. If your doorway is blocked, damaged, cluttered, or neglected, life may feel the same. Stuck, overlooked, dimmed. But when your entrance is welcoming, intentional, and clean, it becomes an energetic magnet. People respond differently. You respond differently. The threshold becomes an invitation to possibility, to peace, to connection. In Buddhist practice, we often say, as within, so without. But the opposite is also true. As without, so within. When we beautify our space with care, our internal world often follows. And sometimes a new beginning really does start from the ground up, with a new mat placed with intention under your very own feet. 4, rusty tools or abandoned metal items. Rust, it creeps quietly, doesn't it? It doesn't burst through the door. It doesn't announce itself. It takes its time, slowly, patiently, gnawing away at surfaces we once found strong and beautiful. It shows up on old lanterns, forgotten hinges, garden spades, wind chimes that no longer ring, incense burners that haven't seen fire in years. Rust is more than a sign of oxidation. It's the residue of time. It's the physical echo of everything we forgot, ignored, or put off for later. But here's the deeper truth. Rust doesn't just eat metal, it eats momentum. In the energetic world, especially when we examine the threshold of our homes, rusted tools or abandoned metal objects near the front door aren't just a matter of decor. They symbolize the stories, identities, beliefs, and attachments we've yet to release. They are the karmic echoes of our past selves, sitting, waiting, lingering in the spaces we pretend not to see. And their presence at the place where energy enters and exits our home, that has profound consequences. From a spiritual perspective, rust is not just deterioration, it is arrested transformation. Metal, when alive and polished, is dynamic. It reflects light, it shapes, it conducts energy. But when it rusts, it becomes heavy. It no longer reflects, it absorbs, it drags. Metaphorically, rusted metal is the embodiment of unprocessed emotion. It is the weight of things we've put down, but never truly let go of. Maybe you stopped using those garden shears after your parent passed away, but you couldn't bring yourself to throw them away. Maybe that wind chime by your door belonged to a former partner, and though the relationship has long ended, you never moved it. You let it fade into the background. So many of us do this. We tell ourselves, it's just decoration, or it has sentimental value, or even, I don't even see it anymore. But our subconscious does every day, and it remembers. In Buddhist practice, everything is seen as impermanent. Clinging to objects, especially those associated with past identities or outdated emotions, is seen as a subtle form of suffering. The moment you stop using something but don't release it, it becomes a psychic placeholder. It occupies space without giving anything in return. And when that object is rusting on your front porch, it becomes more than clutter. It becomes a silent guardian of who you used to be, quietly blocking who you're becoming. I once spent 3 weeks teaching meditation at a retreat center nestled in the hills of northern Vietnam. It was a serene place tucked between rice terraces and bamboo groves, built almost entirely of natural materials. The air smelled like lemongrass and rain. It should have felt like peace, but from the moment I arrived, something felt heavy, like a low-frequency hum. Nothing obvious, just a feeling of spiritual fogginess, as if the land had forgotten how to breathe fully. The sessions went well enough, but guests moved slowly, almost as if in molasses. People slept longer than usual. Some complained of headaches or mild irritability. On the 5th day, during a morning walk around the perimeter, I noticed something near the entrance gate, a rusted old incense holder tucked behind a stone bench. I asked the staff about it. They said it had belonged to the founder of the center, a monk who had passed away many years prior. "We left it there to honor him," they said, "but we don't use it anymore." I didn't question the sentiment, but I gently suggested they move it. Not discard it, necessarily, but relocate it to a more private place, perhaps the ancestral altar inside, they agreed. A week later, something shifted. Guests began mentioning how lighter the retreat felt. People started waking up early, chatting more. One guest said, "It's weird, but something feels clearer, like the space just opened up." They didn't know anything had changed. Not a single wall had moved, but the energy had. Removing that rusted incense holder, once sacred, now dormant, freed the threshold of its energetic weight. It made space for new energy to enter. And it did. We often hear the phrase, "let it go," in spiritual circles. But letting go doesn't always mean detachment or rejection. Sometimes it simply means choosing the present moment over the past, choosing presence over nostalgia, choosing clarity over clutter. Letting go of rusted tools or decor isn't about dishonoring memory, it's about honoring who you are now. And the simple act of polishing, restoring, or discarding an old item can be just as spiritually significant as any mantra or mudra. It says, "I am not frozen, I am not stuck. I am willing to move forward." If you feel inspired or even slightly uncomfortable reading this, that's a good sign. It means your awareness is waking up. You're ready to reclaim your space. Here's a simple but transformative practice to clear out rusted or abandoned energy at your entrance. Step 1, step outside. Stand at your front door, not as its owner, but as a guest. What do you notice? What's the first metal object that catches your eye? Step 2, take a visual inventory. Look for rusted tools or garden accessories, old nails, screws, hinges, broken lanterns, wind chimes, or statues, metal planters with corrosion or discoloration, forgotten mailboxes or metal gates in disrepair. Step 3, tune into your body. How do you feel in the presence of these items? Heavy, tired, disconnected? Take note. Your body often knows before your mind does. Step 4, decide what to do with each item. Polish and restore items that still carry good energy. Repurpose objects in creative, loving ways. Discard those that no longer serve without guilt. If you're uncertain, move them temporarily to a holding area away from the entrance. Step 5, cleanse the space. Use sound, a bell, singing bowl, or clapping, or smoke, sage, palo santo, or incense, to clear residual energy. As you do, set an intention. This threshold now welcomes only clarity, vitality, and peace. Step 6, add something symbolic. Replace old items with 1 or 2 high-vibration objects, something that reflects the energy you want to attract. A polished wind chime, a reflective metal sculpture, or a bowl of sacred stones. You might be thinking, but some of those objects have meaning. They belong to someone I loved. That's completely valid. Sentiment is not the enemy. Unconscious stagnation is. If something is truly sacred to you, treat it as sacred. Don't leave it rusting on the porch. Bring it inside, place it on an altar. Clean it, acknowledge it, give it the attention it deserves. And if you're holding on to something only because you feel guilty for letting it go, that's not sentiment, that's bondage. True connection doesn't require rust as proof. Rusted tools, broken decor, abandoned pieces of metal. These aren't just relics of the past, they're energetic bookmarks. Markers of where you paused, where you stopped choosing. But now you can choose again. Choose clarity, choose vitality, choose to stand at your own threshold and declare, this space is no longer a museum of what was. It is a portal for what's possible. 5. Faded or hidden house numbers. One of the most subtle, almost invisible signals that a home sends to the outside world is its house number. These numbers, which we often take for granted, are essential markers of identity, direction, and presence. But when they fade into obscurity, are blocked by foliage, or become neglected through time, they send a very specific and energetically significant message. I do not wish to be seen. In Buddhist thought, clarity is not only a virtue, it's a prerequisite for awakening. The word vipassana, one of the most ancient forms of Buddhist meditation, literally translates to clear seeing or insight. In that context, anything that blurs vision, physical or metaphysical, is seen as an obstacle to awareness and liberation. So what happens when your home itself, your place of rest, creation, and transformation, becomes visually unclear to others or even to you? It blocks alignment, and this misalignment, while it may seem small, can influence how energy, opportunity, people, and even prosperity enter your life. In purely practical terms, a house number helps others locate you. It ensures the pizza delivery gets to the right place. Your guests arrive without confusion. Your mail lands in the correct mailbox. But from an energetic and symbolic perspective, it does much more. Your house number is your home's declaration of presence. It is a visible affirmation. I exist, I belong here. I am ready to receive what is meant for me. Think about it this way. If you were to meet someone for the first time and they whispered their name under their breath while looking away, how would that affect your interaction? Would you feel welcomed? Would you feel clarity? Likely not. And yet, that's what a faded or hidden house number does. It muffles your introduction to the world. For homes that function as creative spaces, sanctuaries, or entrepreneurial headquarters, this matters even more. If you run a business from home, write from your study, or practice healing arts in your living room, your home is a node of energy distribution. When the entry point is unclear, when your address is visually or energetically obscured, it becomes harder for energy to locate you. This is not metaphysical fluff. It's practical energy psychology. A few years ago, I worked with a woman, let's call her Sarah, who ran a wellness business from her home. She offered Reiki, energy healing, and taught weekly meditation classes in her studio space. Her website was polished. Her intentions were clear. And yet, she struggled. Clients booked once, then disappeared. Deliveries were often late. Friends complained they couldn't find her house. When she came to me, she was frustrated. It's like the universe is skipping over me, she said. I'm doing everything right, but things just don't land. I asked to see her home. When I arrived, it became immediately clear. Her house was lovely, but the number was completely hidden beneath a thick growth of ivy. There was no light above it. From the street, it was nearly impossible to find. I looked at her gently and asked, "Are you sure you want to be found?" She blinked. It took a moment, but I saw something shift. "Honestly, I'm not sure," she said. "Sometimes I feel safe being invisible." And there it was. Part of her, the part that had been hurt or rejected or disappointed, was still in hiding. Her house number was mirroring that internal state. So we worked not just on the exterior, but the interior. The healing was both structural and spiritual. The next week, she cleared the ivy. She installed a soft, warm light above the number. She repainted the digits in gold, and she set a new intention. Let those meant to find me, find me. Within 2 months, her practice was booked. Neighbors she'd never met started saying hello. One of her guided meditations went viral. She told me, "It's like people can finally see me, and I can finally see myself." Our environments constantly shape our internal experiences, even when we're not paying conscious attention. Environmental psychology has shown that visual clarity in a space reduces cognitive fatigue and enhances decision-making. That's because clarity reduces the brain's background processing. In other words, when things are clearly marked, organized, and intentional, your mind relaxes. You experience less resistance and confusion. When your house number is hard to find, your body responds with subtle tension every time you arrive at home. You may not realize it, but your nervous system picks up on that micro disorder. It becomes part of your baseline energy. Over time, this sense of misalignment can contribute to chronic stress, burnout, and a feeling that you are off path. And because spiritual energy is attracted to clarity and coherence, that misalignment can repel the very things you are trying to manifest. New clients, relationships, success, peace. So how do we restore clarity at the doorway? Here's a mindful, actionable process for reactivating your house number and bringing your home into spiritual visibility. Step 1. Pause and observe. Stand outside your home and look at your number from the street. Can you see it clearly? How does it feel? If you were a guest or a guide, would you find your way with ease? Step 2. Assess lighting. Your number should be visible day and night. Consider installing a soft light above or below it. Avoid harsh fluorescent lighting. Opt for warm tones that invoke safety, trust, and welcome. Step 3. Choose intentionally. If your number plaque is worn or outdated, replace it. Choose materials that reflect your energy. Wood for groundedness, metal for clarity, ceramic for warmth. Think of your number as an extension of your values. Step 4. Set the energy. Once installed or refreshed, pause at your door. Place your hand over the number. Speak a short blessing or intention aloud. Let this home be seen by what is meant for it. Let clarity guide all who seek it. Step 5. Maintain the vibration. Check your house number regularly. Dust it, wipe off pollen, trim nearby plants. Let your awareness remain engaged. Just as we refresh our inner clarity through meditation, we must tend our outer clarity through presence. The process of making your home, and by extension yourself, visible is not always comfortable. It invites exposure, it requires courage, but it also calls in connection. When your house number is clear, you say to the universe, I am here, I am ready. Let life find me. You do not need to shout. You do not need to flash lights or paint in neon. Quiet clarity is enough. Presence is enough. A house number is more than digits on a wall. It is your energetic handshake, your first impression, your invitation. Let it be beautiful. Let it be bold. Let it be a reflection of everything within you that is ready, finally, fully to be seen. 6. Clocks near the entrance. Of all the objects we casually place in our homes, clocks might seem the most harmless. They're just instruments of time, right? They help us stay on schedule, keep appointments, and remain on track. But in the spiritual and psychological landscape of a home, where we place a clock, especially at the entrance, can carry deep symbolic and energetic implications. When a clock is mounted near the front door, it becomes more than a timekeeper. It becomes a message. And that message, repeated each time we enter or exit, is this: hurry, you're running out of time. You're already late. In Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness of time is essential. The impermanence of all things is one of the core teachings of the Dharma. But being aware of impermanence is not the same as being haunted by it. When clocks are placed at the wrong energetic junction, particularly at the doorway between the outer world and our inner sanctuary, they stop being helpful reminders and start becoming sources of subtle but constant pressure. In almost every wisdom tradition, from Tibetan Buddhism to traditional Feng Shui to Western mysticism, the entrance of a home is treated as a sacred liminal space. It is the point of transition between the chaos of the world and the sanctity of our personal lives. In Buddhist monasteries, for example, there is often a brief pause before stepping into a meditation hall, a symbolic letting go of outside concerns before entering the present moment. When we place a ticking clock or countdown mechanism in that same threshold, we undo that pause. We override the intention of stillness with the intrusion of urgency. Instead of breathing in spaciousness, we inhale tension. It's like standing at the gate of a temple, ready to bow into silence, only to hear a ticking metronome whisper, "You're behind." Hurry up. Time is escaping. Several years ago, I worked with a client. Let's call her Emily. She was a highly successful creative director at a marketing firm. Smart, driven, insightful, and exhausted. No matter how much she tried to slow down her life, she always felt behind. Meditation didn't help. Yoga made her restless. Even time off made her anxious. She described her daily state as perpetually chasing the day. During a home energy assessment, I visited her house. It was beautifully arranged, full of light, warm colors, and well-organized spaces. But the moment I walked in the front door, something felt tight. And there it was, a large, modern, silver clock directly on the entry wall. It was sleek, loud, and always in her line of sight. Tick, tick, tick. I pointed to it gently. "Does that clock help you feel at ease?" I asked. She paused. "Honestly, Shishio," she said, "it stresses me out. I always feel like it's rushing me." We moved it, first to a neutral storage area. Later, she relocated it to her study, where it helped her track time while working, but didn't confront her at every exit or arrival. The shift was noticeable almost immediately. Her anxiety lessened. She stopped rushing. Within a few weeks, she began arriving early to meetings, something she hadn't done in years. She even told me, half joking, "I think I'm finally on time for my own life." That is the power of intentional placement. It wasn't about getting rid of the clock. It was about returning agency to how time functioned in her life. Let's zoom out for a moment and examine how our collective culture treats time. In modern Western society, time has become commodified. It's not just something we experience. It's something we spend, manage, save, or waste. We talk about productivity as if it's morality. We measure worth by how efficient we are. This attitude sneaks into our homes. Clocks, timers, alerts, they aren't neutral anymore. They're loaded with expectations. So when you place a clock by the front door, you're not just helping yourself remember appointments. You're reinforcing the cultural message that time is running out, that you must be productive, that rest is only earned. This is completely at odds with spiritual life. In Zen, time is infinite. The phrase "just this moment" is used in teachings not to suggest there is no future, but to show us that we are never behind. That presence is the true schedule, that the rhythm of our breath is more sacred than the ticking of a clock. If you've read this far and feel called to shift your relationship to time in your space, here's a mindful process to begin with. Factor 1. Pause and observe. Stand at your front door. Ask yourself honestly, what do I feel when I see or hear a clock here? If the answer is anything other than peace, it may be time for a change. 2. Remove or relocate. If the clock ticks loudly or draws attention, consider moving it to a workspace, kitchen, or central area where time is functionally useful but not spiritually invasive. 3. Replace with a symbol of timelessness. In place of the clock, place something that evokes stillness. A framed poem, a bell, a piece of driftwood, a candle, a photo of a peaceful place. Let your entry evoke a meditation hall, not a train station. 4. Anchor a daily pause. Each time you come home, pause for just 3 breaths. Allow the space to welcome you back to yourself, not your calendar. 5. Rebuild time from the inside out. If you must have a timepiece nearby, choose a digital one with no ticking sound or secondhand. Or consider a beautiful wall calendar that focuses on intention rather than urgency. When we stop placing clocks where they don't belong, especially in spiritual thresholds, we allow time to return to its original function. A tool, not a tyrant. You are not behind. You are not late for your life. The fact that you are here, breathing, reading these words, means you are right on schedule. Imagine this. You walk into your home after a long day. There's no ticking, no numbers flashing, no silent reminder that your to-do list is unfinished. Just breath, just peace, just the chance to be. That's the kind of entry we deserve. That's the kind of energy we can create with one simple shift and a lot of presence. Let's take a moment, just you and me, and step back from the details. We've talked about trash bins, worn doormats, wilted plants, rusted metal, faded numbers. and the soft but anxious tick of clocks. On the surface, these may seem like ordinary things, everyday things, things that live quietly at the edge of your awareness. But as we've seen today, nothing is truly silent. Everything at your front door tells a story, whether you're aware of it or not. Every object speaks, every placement whispers, every neglected corner, every broken hinge, every forgotten pot is a messenger. And the question is, what are those messages saying? Are they telling the world you are open and ready to receive? Or are they echoing old stories, old fears, old versions of yourself that you no longer live in, but haven't yet moved out of? You see, energy doesn't wait for permission. It flows where it's welcomed. It enters through clarity, through openness, through invitation. And your front door, your threshold, is not just a functional part of your home. It's a spiritual mouthpiece, a silent speaker that says more than your words ever could. It's the first point of contact between your inner world and the outer world, the gateway through which abundance, clarity, peace, creativity, and connection arrive. Or don't. Let's be clear, this isn't about perfection. It's not about becoming a minimalist, redesigning your home to look like a temple, or following some rule book on feng shui. It's not about trends, it's about intentionality. Whatever lives at your threshold shapes what passes through it. So why not place beauty there? Why not place love? Why not place intention? Because every day you walk through that space, and whether you're aware of it or not, it sets your tone. If you want to bring in better days, start with better entryways. If you want more peace, create a portal that breathes calm. If you want more abundance, make room for it to arrive. If you want to feel less rushed, let the doorway feel timeless. And if you want to invite more joy, start by removing what blocks it. This is not just spiritual metaphor. This is embodied mindfulness. This is the practical magic of small changes made with big energy. And when you're ready, I invite you to share. Tell me in the comments, what did you find at your front door? And more importantly, what are you choosing to release? When we share our stories, we create a ripple. We inspire each other to live more mindfully, to tend our spaces with love, to see our homes not just as shelters, but as spiritual allies on the path. And if you'd like to continue walking that path with me, with us here on New Day Mindfulness, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs a gentle nudge, and subscribe for more teachings that bridge ancient wisdom with everyday living. This is your space. This is your moment. Let your threshold be the place where your next chapter begins. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, may your doorway stay open, may your heart stay ready, and may your days unfold with presence, peace, and purpose. With gratitude,